Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress. I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in. Now, I want to continue in this most marvelous book, Codeword Barbelon by P.D. Stewart, the subtitle of which is The Sons of Loyola and Their Plans for World Domination. We're talking about the Jesuit order and those in cahoots with them to create a global government, a global religion, and a global economic system headed up by the Pope. And yesterday, we were talking specifically about Skull and Bones, the secret society known as Skull and Bones at Yale University, and President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush and John F. Kerry's membership in that diabolical secret society. And what we learned yesterday was that the candidates, the initiates into Skull and Bones, have to express their allegiance to the Pope, to the Messiah figure of Freemasonry, and also to the Black Pope, who dubs them a Knight of Eulogia. And when I first read of the initiation ceremony into Skull and Bones, I'd never heard the word eulogia before, so I Googled it, and I found it in the Roman Catholic Encyclopedia online, the New Advent Encyclopedia. And to paraphrase, it literally means eulogia is an ancient word that was used to describe what is now known as the Eucharist, or the Blessed Sacrament. And that brings us to where we're going to begin this morning with this portion of the chapter subtitled, You Must Be Born Again. Is Bush a Christian? That's the question we pose about past President George W. Bush. P.D. Stewart writes, the Bonesmen use the Greek word eulogia, or blessing, or blessed, is what it means. And it has to do specifically with the Blessed Sacrament of the Roman Catholic Church, which is the Eucharist. It is called the Blessed Sacrament, or just blessed. And that's where we get the word eulogia. And so you know by doing the math that a candidate for Yale, when he is inducted into the order, he is dubbed by a caricature of that is called Don Quixote, but it's just a pseudonym for Don Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuit order, the first Jesuit general, and he is pronounced a Knight of Eulogia. The candidate is pronounced a Knight of Eulogia, or a Knight of the Blessed Sacrament. All right, a Knight of the Eucharist. They all mean the same thing. Now again, the Bonesmen use the Greek word eulogia, which means blessing or blessed, and are referred to as Knights of Eulogia because, so they say, a Roman goddess called Eulogia, after ascending to heaven in 322 B.C., came back to earth in 1832 to found their society. We observe firstly that the Greek general Alexander the Great died in 322 B.C. and was buried in Memphis, Egypt. His body was dug up and reburied in the Gnostic capital of Alexandria, Egypt. The home of Skull and Bones is a windowless structure built to look like a mausoleum or a tomb in a Greco-Egyptian style. The hidden meaning of the word eulogia is revealed in the Catholic Encyclopedia of 1913, page 750. Quote, the little blessed loaves or cakes of bread, which received a special benediction and were then sent by bishops and priests to others as gifts in sign of fraternal affection and ecclesiastical communion, was called eulogia, unquote. Quoting further, it says the eulogia is prescribed in the liturgies of St. Basil. This bread is called eulogia because it is blessed by the priest. This, according to Schaff Herzog's The Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, page 39. Could Knights of Eulogia refer to those who follow Catholicism? Next we ask, is Bush a Christian or a Freemason? President George W. Bush claims that he is on a divine appointed mission, a divinely appointed mission. He also claims to be born again. At one stage in the ritual initiation of Skull and Bones, the initiate must, quote, lay naked in a coffin and tell their deepest and darkest sexual secrets as part of their initiation, unquote. That's a quote from Esquire in the September issue of 1976, page 85. And it says, Satanic High Priest Anton LaVey explains the significance of this in his book, The Satanic Rituals, Companion to the Satanic Bible. Quote, the ceremony of rebirth takes place in a large coffin. This is similar to the coffin symbolism that is found in most lodge rituals. And you'll find this death, burial, and resurrection, a use of a coffin for this death, burial, and resurrection ritual in Skull and Bones and in Freemasonry. So there's a direct connection between Skull and Bones and Freemasonry, and we know Skull and Bones is directly associated with Jesuitism and Catholicism because of its rituals. And as carefully cloaked as it is, Freemasonry also serves the Jesuit general. Their ritualistic abominations are paralleled. So Freemasonry is just another form of Jesuitism. It's Jesuitism under another name. Now it says, during the 1988 presidential campaign, a TV reporter asked the then Vice President George H.W. Bush Sr. whether he was a Christian. Bush initially stammered, but then said, quote, if you mean born again, then yes, I'm a Christian, unquote. Did he mean Christian or a born-again bonesman? To set the record straight so that Christians don't get confused by Bush's quote-unquote born-again lark, Skull and Bones believe that on the night of initiation, the initiate, quote, dies to the world and is born again into the order, unquote. That is, when a candidate enters the coffin during his initiation, he's considered to have died to self and to this world, and born again into the order. Here is part of an interview from the original transcript given by President George W. Bush Jr. in 2000. Time magazine. Did you have any qualms, say, about joining an elite secret club like Bones? Bush. No qualms at all. I was honored. I was fairly nonchalant. I didn't view it as a great heritage thing. Time. Demystify it for those who might think it's a cross between a Masonic Lodge and the Trilateral Commission. Bush. Without revealing all the great secrets? I got a few of my old club mates who could demystify it, meaning the meaning behind the coffin ceremony, etc. And I couldn't remember whether my dad showed up, speaking of his initiation ceremony, at the tomb at Yale. That's the end of the quote, and he said, Mr. Bush did not deny that Skull and Bones was a Masonic lodge. Rather, he confirmed that he could not reveal all the great secrets. In fact, in that same interview, Bush said of his family involvement in Skull and Bones, quote, my heritage is part of who I am, unquote. As Bush himself once said, to understand people, you have to look at their family. And there's a history of membership into Skull and Bones, and I believe even the grandfather, Prescott, was a member of Skull and Bones, if I'm not mistaken. So Skull and Bones is a heritage of the Bush family, and so is Nazism. and so is Catholicism, and so is Jesuitism. So his initiation into Skull and Bones is very much predictable. Now, under the subtitle, Faith of the Fathers from Granddad to President, P.D. Stewart writes, George Herbert Walker, founder of the Walker Cup, grandfather of George H.W. Bush, and paternal great-grandfather of President George W. Bush, was educated at a Jesuit college in England, Stonyhurst College. Yes, the great-grandfather of President Bush, George H. Walker, who lived from 1875 to 1953, known to his family and friends as Bert, attended Stonyhurst College, a severe Jesuit boarding school in the United Kingdom. Stonyhurst, an independent boarding school near Clitheroe, Lancashire, is where the Jesuits first established themselves on English soil. It is the senior Jesuit college in England and the English campus of the Jesuit College of St. Omer College in Belgium. It was there that the first Catholic Archbishop of America, the Jesuit John Carroll, founder of Georgetown University, the first university in this country, was founded by a Jesuit priest by the name of John Carroll. Today it is known as Georgetown University. It's named after President George Washington. And that's where he was trained. And it says Stonyhurst College, I'll make that clear. This is where George Walker was trained. And it says Stonyhurst College is where the Jesuit provincial resides. Quote, it is a long-standing practice at Stonyhurst that students write the Jesuit maxim AMDG, which stands for Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam, which means all for the greater glory of God. And it is written in the top left-hand corner of any piece of work they do. AMDG. Just the initials AMDG. And it says, so has President Bush followed in the steps of his great-granddad Bert and remained Catholic? Let us hear from his own lips. Quote, I'm here for a reason, Bush told his chief political aide Karl Rove after the September 11th attacks. A close friend of the president said, quote, I think in his frame, this is what God has asked him to do, unquote. One senior administration official said, quote, Bush really believes he was placed here to do this as part of a divine plan, unquote. What exactly is Bush's divine mission? Is his divine plan AMDG, Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam, all for the greater glory of God, all for the greater glory of the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church? It says we need not guess at the answer. Only 2 years into his presidency, and Bush made the following statement when addressing 60 bishops and other Roman Catholic Church leaders at a reception he hosted at the White House to open the Pope's Cultural Center in Washington, D.C. Here's what he said, quote, the best way to honor Pope John Paul II is to take his teachings seriously and put his words and teachings into action here in America, unquote. Now, what were John Paul II's teachings? A new world order. Making America Catholic. He also taught, and I've seen this with my own eyes, John Paul II taught that Christ did not come to be the Messiah, to save men from their sins. Christ came to show man the Christ in every man. Now that's right off the pages of his handwritten work. Christ did not come to save men from their sins, to be their Messiah and Savior. Christ literally came to show the Christ in every man, to demonstrate the Christ in every man. Do you know what that means? That we are all gods. And that to become gods, we need to transcend our humanity. We need to transcend our human failures, our human frailty, and become gods on our own. That's a works gospel. That's not a salvation gospel in Christ Jesus, and that's why he said Christ did not come to save man, but to show the Christ in every man. That is the new age load of hooey that's going to take millions and billions of souls with it to the lake of fire. George W. Bush worshipped this man, Pope John Paul II. And he said that we should put his teachings into action here in this country. Now, where's the separation of church and state in that? That the government of the United States should put into action Antichrist Pope John Paul II's teachings. Now, does some of the things that happened during the George W. Bush administration begin to make sense? Do you see that? Do you understand when I say that President George W. Bush served his little God in Rome faithfully as the president of this country? He did. He's no Christian. He's Catholic. He's Luciferian. And for those who are shocked to hear me use those two words in the same sentence, it's because you've been taught all your life that Catholicism is a Christian sect. It's not Christianity at all. It's Luciferian. It's satanic. It is the Church of Antichrist, just like the Protestant reformers said. We need look no further for the Antichrist than the Pope of Rome. Continuing with the book, it says, 3 years later, in 2004, Bush told a Knight of Columbus gathering that he was their friend in administration, and that together they would work to change America. Now, what is the motto of the Knights of Columbus? Make America Catholic. And that's how they are changing America. And this is where they get the word change during the Barack Obama administration. Change. They ran a whole campaign on one word. Change. And what is that change? A complete destruction of the economy of this country to make us all slaves to the creditors of this country. And who are the creditors? The Federal Reserve System. But that's not enough. In order to understand what that means, you have to know who runs the Federal Reserve System. And we know that that is the Rothschild banking dynasty of Europe. Freemasonic Jews who are written up in the Encyclopedia Judaica, where you would naturally find them being Jews, as it says in page 160 of F. Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil. They are the guardians of the Vatican Treasury. So the United States national debt belongs to the Vatican. We are all debtors to the Vatican. And if we get so deep in debt that there's no hope that we could ever repay our debts to the Federal Reserve Bank, then we become slaves of the creditor. And the creditor is the Pope. And you hear so much talk among Christians today that God's law is dead. But God gave a law to his people. He said, let not your money out to usury. But this country, from the very beginning, its economic system was based on usury. And now the interest on the debt that this country owes cannot be repaid. We can't even pay the interest on the debt. And we have all been declared slaves of the Pope, and he may do with us whatever he pleases. And history shows us what pleases him, and that is to kill Protestants. And that's what's going to happen in this country. We'll either pay our allegiance to the Pope by joining this New World Order and this New World System that's coming upon the scene, or we will be killed, and they will think they're doing God's service. That's where we're headed, and that's why this program is called Inquisition Update. And it's so frustrating that I just can't seem to make people comprehend this, but we're going to continue. I mean, there are those that are called to this understanding, and there are those that just simply cannot be awakened to the reality of this New World Order. And it's a horror what is coming upon this country. He says 3 years later, in 2004, Bush told a Knights of Columbus gathering that he was their friend in the administration, and that together, the administration and the Knights of Columbus, together, they would work to change America, and that is what they are doing. They're making America Catholic. Is Bush a disguised Romanist, you ask? Really, dear reader, you are far too inquisitive. Now follow closely, he says. Earlier I mentioned the Bush family connection to the Jesuits of Stonyhurst. That information was not complete. I must now complete it. What I omitted to tell you was that the Bush family, quote, were staunch Catholics, and to guarantee they stayed that way, they sent young Bert to Stonyhurst, unquote. Their young men are groomed for leadership and in a variety of techniques for advancing the cause of Roman Catholicism among Protestants. Bert Walker became Union Banking Corporation's president, and Union Banking became the Nazi or the Jesuit money laundering machine. See, the Bush family and the Walker family all had connections to Nazi Germany. They bankrolled Hitler, and they were staunch Roman Catholics. All of the hierarchy of the Nazi Party were devout Roman Catholics. Some of them were Jesuit trained, some of them were Jesuit advised, and Himmler's father was even a Jesuit priest. And it says, from Jesuit-trained Bert Walker to the Pope adoring President George W. Bush, it says, does this not all make sense now? On March 23, 2001, the day after promising to put the Pope's teachings into action in America, Mr. Bush spoke at the Catholic University of America, where he reminded his audience that the former president of the Soviet Union had called the Pope, quote, the highest moral authority on earth. Does Mr. Bush also regard the Pope as the greatest moral authority on the earth? Yes, he does, and so do so many of those who rule and reign from Washington, D.C. And that's why this country is in the shape that it's in. You're listening to the Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Have you seen the Left Behind movies? Have you read the Left Behind fictional book series. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. Because they see the world stage shaping to fulfill what they have been led to believe is sound biblical interpretation, a Left Behind rapture scenario, this false view of prophecy is reinforced in the mind, not only of its adherents, but also includes those who have been merely exposed to the specific media. Is it possible that false prophecy can be fulfilled? The rapture theories have always been in dispute. Pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib disputes have risen up in exclusively evangelical circles of recent history, so that when true believers don't suddenly disappear, this element will easily go by the wayside when all see a new Jewish temple begin to be built. Will this be part of the great delusion that will come upon the whole earth? It seems that this great prophetic delusion has already overcome practically the entire American evangelical and Christian world. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. To learn more, visit crosstheborder.org. That's CROSS, crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Okay, welcome back to the second half of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. If you enjoy Inquisition Update, please support Inquisition Update by supporting FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Now we're going to continue with the book Codeword Barbelon by P.D. Stewart. This is the first of a two-book series. You can get it at www.luxverbi.org, LuxVerbi.org. And you can buy this book online. And I'm told the second issue is now available. And I have a copy of it, and I'm currently reading it. And hopefully we'll get to read that book here on Inquisition Update as well. One program note before we continue tomorrow. My guest, Bill Hughes, author of the book The Secret Terrorist and the Enemy Unmasked. He'll be with us again tomorrow. We'll continue our verse-by-verse study of Revelation chapter 13. Shocking news now coming to light from God's holy book, Revelation chapter 13. Be here tomorrow for that program. Now, Again, it says on March 23rd, 2001, the day after promising to put the Pope's teachings into action in America, Mr. Bush spoke at the Catholic University of America, where he reminded his audience that the former president of the Soviet Union had called the Pope the highest moral authority on earth. That was Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev. He and his wife Raisa, dressed in black, and Raisa wearing a veil, had a personal visit with the Pope. That's right, the president of the godless communist Russia went and knelt at the feet of the papacy and kissed his ring and called him, as I am told, when introducing Raisa to the Pope, he said, "Meet the highest moral authority on the earth." And that's how Mikhail Gorbachev regarded the papacy. And he helped topple the Soviet Union. And I'm sure that the papacy lauded itself with the help of President Ronald Wilson Reagan, an Irish Roman Catholic president who reestablished formal diplomatic relations with the Vatican in 1984, together with the help of Mikhail Gorbachev, helped overthrow the Soviet Union, and my guess is all of it was arranged to bear credence to the Fatima apparitions. And it's diabolical what is going on in the world. Nobody seems to realize the significance of it, but we'll do our best to educate and inform our listeners here. The author continues, "Intelligent reader, whenever you hear a man express such views as freely as President Bush does, you can be sure that he's either a Jesuit, a tool of the Jesuits, or that he has been poisoned by their maxims. Take your pick, the conclusions are not far different. Such is the strange delirium that comes over those who allow themselves, to inhale the Jesuit chloroform. Mr. Bush did not kiss the Pope's slippered toe for no reason at his Skull and Bones initiation. This, reader, is the kernel of the whole matter, and we have no further need for the cracking thereof." Now he continues under the subtitle, "Presidents Kneel in Homage Before the Dead Pope." He says, on June 9th, 2007, President George W. Bush Jr. met privately with Pope Benedict XVI at the Vatican. Both men exchanged gifts. Why did the President of the United States of America go to Rome to meet the King of the Vatican? Why did Bush and Benedict say to each other during those 35 minutes of closed-door discussions in the Pope's private library? Consider also the significance of Benedict's message-packed gift to the U.S. Commander-in-Chief, a rare first edition of the autobiography of Archbishop John Carroll of Baltimore. Carroll was the first Catholic archbishop in the United States and founder of the first Jesuit university in America, Georgetown University. And we'll also remind the listeners, when we read the book The Ark and the Dove by J. Moss Ives, we know that John Carroll was a Jesuit priest, and he was a member of an immensely wealthy and influential and well-connected blue blood Catholic family from Ireland. And they donated the land for what is now known as Washington, D.C. And they had a great deal to do with the founding of our federal government and the Constitution of the United States. And John Carroll, Jesuit priest John Carroll, was the first archbishop, the first Roman Catholic archbishop in this country, in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, just below in this book is a very, very telling photograph. It's at the funeral mass of Pope John Paul II. who's lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And just behind the body of Antichrist Pope John Paul II sits the American dignitaries who are kneeling in somber mourning for their little God in Rome. And from left to right in the photograph, we have President George W. Bush, his wife Laura, President George H.W. Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, and Condoleezza Rice, all wearing black, and they all look like they've been weeping. And they're all kneeling with hands folded before them. And if anybody doubts who they served, this picture will erase all doubts. The caption under the photograph says, Pope John Paul II lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, April 8, 2005. From left to right, President George W. Bush, First Lady Laura Bush, former President George H.W. Bush, and former President Bill Clinton, and Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. And the author continues, he says, seeing so many of the world's leaders kneeling with hands clasped as if worshiping before the bier of the dead John Paul II, Robert Higgs commented, quote, observing the many government leaders gathered at the Vatican for the funeral of Pope John Paul II, we might well have suspected that the world's political military chieftains need what the Pope has more than the Pope needs what they have, unquote. According to eyewitness reports, the Pope's funeral brought together the single largest gathering of heads of state in history, surpassing the funeral of Winston Churchill. In a historical rarity, Protestant and Eastern Orthodox Christian leaders, as well as the leaders in Judaism and Islam, offered memorials and prayers. And even the Archbishop of Canterbury was present at the papal funeral for the first time since the Church of England broke with the papacy in the 16th century. He broke all records. The whole world came to mourn the death of Pope John Paul II. And he says, this brings us back nicely to the question of why Bush said in his autobiography, quote, in my senior year at Yale, I joined Skull and Bones, a secret society so secret I can't say anything more, unquote. Why not, Mr. Bush? Intelligent reader, is that not a fair question to ask the president of the greatest nation on earth? Why can't Mr. Bush give us an answer? Now, George W. Bush would have us to believe that Skull and Bones is merely a footnote in his past, that he's had nothing to do with the order after graduating from Yale. However, in 1971, quote, needing a job, Bush called a bonesman, Robert H. Gow. Gow, who later told the Washington Post that his Houston-based agricultural company had not been looking for anyone at the time, hired Bush as a management trainee, unquote. Quoting further, it says, in 1977, when Bush formed Arbusto Energy, his first company, he applied to Skull and Bones for financial aid. With assistance from his uncle Jonathan Bush, also a bonesman, he lined up $565,000. One of his bonesman buddies, contributed $93,000. The venture capitalist William H. Draper III, also a bonesman, and 12 bonesmen gave a total of $35,500 to Bush's 1998 gubernatorial campaign. At least 46 bonesmen have given $1,000 apiece to his presidential campaign, the maximum allowed by law, unquote. There's your proof. Besides, how can the American people be sure that Bush hasn't taken an oath to the superiors of his order, which conflicts with his duties as president? In the words of President John F. Kennedy, quote, "The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, and I will add, his private secret society affiliations. That should be disclosed before they ever run for office. And if we could ever wake up the American people to the links between the secret societies in this country and the Jesuit order, we might be able to accomplish it. But I'm afraid there just aren't enough people paying attention." It says, "Yes, we've good reason to fear Mr. Bush and his dual loyalty, for we have evidence that tends to prove President George Bush Jr. is a secret Catholic. We saw his submission to Pope Benedict XVI in April of 2008 when he pulled out all the stops, driving out to the suburban military base to meet Pope Benedict XVI's plane, bringing a giant audience to the South Lawn and hosting a fancy East Room dinner. Bush had never before given a visiting leader or head of state the honor of picking him up at the airport. As a matter of fact, that's a breach of presidential protocol. The President of the United States is to meet foreign dignitaries at the front door of the front door of the White House. The President of the United States doesn't go to them. They come to him. They're on our turf. They need to show the respect that is deserved of the White House. But when Benedict XVI came to this country, President Bush broke all White House protocol and literally went to the airport to meet him as he disembarked from the airplane. And others have shown photographs of Marine Corps officers carrying the Vatican flag, which is a breach of military protocol. They broke all the rules when Benedict was here. And the most significant thing that happened on the first day of his arrival, I don't know of anybody else that discusses this, but they serenaded him with the Fife and Drum Corps. The Fife and Drum Corps speaks of nothing other than the Revolutionary War of the United States. He acknowledged Benedict XVI by playing him the Fife and Drum Corps. And as we read in The Ark and the Dove by J. Moss Ives, it was clear that the Jesuits fomented the Revolutionary War. And our President of the United States was literally honoring Benedict XVI of severing this country from Protestant Great Britain. And only the Catholics, and only well-educated Catholics in this country, the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, would understand the significance of honoring Benedict XVI with the Fife and Drum Corps. And it's a shame that America still doesn't understand the significance of that event. And they also gave him a 21-gun salute. You only do that for military victors. He was literally proclaiming, through these actions, Benedict XVI, the king of this country. President George W. Bush was literally proclaiming Benedict XVI, the king of this country. You don't leave presidential protocol and meet the Pope at the airport unless he's the king of the country. You don't allow a U.S. Marine to carry the papal flag unless the Pope's the king of the country. You don't serenade him with the Fife and Drum Corps unless the Pope is the king of the country. And you don't give him a 21-gun salute unless you're acknowledging him as the king and victor of this country. And yet it was all done in front of the cameras. It was all done in front of the press. It was all done in front of all the American historians. And as near as I know, this is the only program in the country that makes that significance available to the listeners. Yeah, he picked him up at the airport. It says the ceremony featured the U.S. and the Holy Sea's anthems, a 21-gun salute, and the U.S. Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps. But even this author, as astute as he is, doesn't make the connection. All of these things work together to make an unmistakable message that Pope Benedict XVI was the military victor and ruler and king of this country. He continues, he says, Daniel Burke writes in the Washington Post, quote, this Protestant president has surrounded himself with Roman Catholic intellectuals, speechwriters, professors, priests, bishops, and politicians. These Catholics, and thus Catholic social teaching, have for the past 8 years been shaping Bush's speeches, policies, and legacy. Burke adds, quote, if Bill Clinton can be called America's first black president, some say George W. Bush would well be the nation's first Catholic president. Yes, there was Catholic John F. Kennedy, but where Kennedy sought to divorce his religion from his office, the White House, Bush has welcomed Roman Catholic doctrine and teaching into the White House and based many important domestic and foreign policy decisions on them, and I'll add the word foreign. He ruled at the behest of the Pope. The prophecy is fulfilled. All the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And who would ever think that the presidency of the United States would be controlled by the papacy, but it is. And it says, Rick Santorum, the former U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, devout Catholic and Knight of Malta, opined, quote, I don't think there's any question about it. The Catholic president, he's certainly much more Catholic than Kennedy. That according to the Washington Post on April 13th, 2008. Daniel Burke confirms, quote, the former Bush speechwriter Michael Gerson, another evangelical with an affinity for Catholic teaching, there's your ecumenical movement for you, an evangelical with an affinity for Roman Catholicism, says that the key to understanding Bush's domestic policy is to view it through the lens of Rome. Paul Weyrich, an architect of the religious right, goes even further. He said he detects in Bush the same mindset as former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who converted to Catholicism in 2007. Quote, I think he's a secret believer, says Weyrich. Similarly, John DiIulio, Bush's first director of faith-based initiatives, has called the president a closet Catholic. And the rumors are coming from the Vatican, too. The Catholic News Agency confirms, quote, Bush may be considering converting to Catholicism at the end of his presidential term. Bush's political advisor invited Catholic intellectuals, Jesuits, to Texas to explain the teachings of the church to the president, unquote. Now, I hardly think that it's necessary to send Jesuits to the Bush Ranch in Texas to teaching about the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. The Bush family are Catholic. They don't need to be taught about the Roman Catholic Church. I would say the Jesuits got together with Bush at his ranch to celebrate their defeat of this Protestant nation. Certainly no Jesuit would be needed to educate the Bush family about Catholicism. It says proof comes from other sources as well. Mr. Bush was publicly photographed at a mass with folded arms as he received ashes traced on his forehead in the shape of a cross from a Catholic bishop on the Catholic day of Ash Wednesday. Bush was also at a mass in the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle in Washington, D.C. on April 2nd, 2005. And it says, reader, George W. Bush, Jr. has now openly returned to the faith of his great-grandfather, George Herbert Walker Bush, and his ancestors. You'll recall Bert was trained at the Jesuit College of Stonyhurst, and only a few decades ago, the entire Bush family were staunch Roman Catholics. Bush is a secret Catholic who has never strayed from his master's side, the Pope. AMDG, ad majorem Dei gloriam, all for the greater glory of God. Perhaps the clearest evidence of President George W. Bush's submission to the Pope and his allegiance to the Papal Church was seen on April 15, 2008, when Bush gave an extensive interview with Eternal Word Television Network, the EWTN network, a Catholic station. EWTN anchor Raymond Arroyo, using the present tense, asked Mr. Bush concerning the apostolic visit of the Pope, quote, when you look into Pope Benedict's eyes, what do you see? To which Bush replied immediately and without hesitation, God. What did Bush see when he looked into Benedict's eyes? God. How much more proof do we need? As Catholic priest D.S. Phelan, a noted authority on canon law and an attorney in his day, proudly declared, quote, the Pope is the ruler of the world. All the emperors, all the kings, all the princes, all the presidents of the world are as these altar boys of mine, unquote. Are you still scratching your head wondering to whom do the bonesmen take their secret oath of allegiance? Or why Bush said in his book, quote, in my senior year I joined Skull and Bones, a secret society, so secret I can't say anything more, unquote. Perhaps Mr. Bush's reticence is as Bill Cooper says, quote, members of the order take an oath that swear allegiance only to the order and its goal of a new world order, unquote. That's where I'm going to stop today. Thanks for joining me. Stay tuned next for Nicholas Arthur's Cross the Border and Sound Biblical Teaching. See you tomorrow.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn. The Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.